If a person is upset, that's a good indication that they need a validation conversation. And I had lots of ideas of ways that he could solve this problem. Do you ever have a conversation where you just want to be heard, but the person you're talking to just want to give you advice? Do you ever just want your feelings understood and to feel like somebody's on your side, but the person you're talking to is playing devil's advocate or pointing out what you should have said or could have done differently? Yes. I think we all have conversations like that. Problem conversations. Problem conversations. Do you ever have a conversation and it ends in an argument or a fight, or one person or both people walking away offended with their feelings hurt and not coming away with the solutions or the outcome that they had hoped or you had hoped? That happens a lot. Have you ever had a conversation where you shared a problem and the person had no criticism, had no ideas on how to help solve the problem, and no judgment at all? Those ones are few and far between, aren't they? Everybody has advice to give. Almost everyone has advice to give and ways to critique what you should do or shouldn't do, or how you should solve your problems, or what you could have done differently, or what you could now do differently. And I think that hardly ever happens, that the person you're talking to doesn't have ideas on how to help, whether that's help or help. Whether it's unsolicited advice or they thought it was solicited advice. Conversations happen all the time to everyone. Everyone has conversations, and often our conversations have to do with our problems. Those are called problem conversations. There are two types of problem conversations. The first type of problem conversation is the validation conversation. A validation conversation is usually when the person just wants to be heard. They want their feelings recognized, noted, and validated. They want to talk about it. They want to work it through in their mind and vocally, and have a listening ear, someone who can empathize, sympathize, and not criticize. That's a validation conversation. The way you can be a validating listener is just by trying to sympathize and trying to hear where they're coming from in their story and their point of view on what happened or what's about to happen. That's a validation conversation. The second type of problem conversation is the brainstorming conversation. Brainstorming conversation happens when a person is looking for options, ideas, possible solutions, and trying to come up with a decision as to what to do with their problem. Brainstorming conversations can be so helpful and so needed and just amazing. The way to be a brainstorming conversationalist is to share your ideas, share your input, share your knowledge, and then give an encouragement when the person decides which path that they want to take, which idea they want to roll with and try. That's the way to be good at brainstorming conversations. So there are some pitfalls about problem conversations. Like I talked about before, problem conversations can end with fighting, arguing, being offended, having our feelings hurt, or feeling even worse than we did before, like adding another problem to the already problematic situation. We don't want that type of conversation. I think the key to our problem conversations is recognizing which type of conversation is needed now, in which circumstances, which type of problem solving situation and conversation needs to happen. Does it need to be a validation conversation, or does it need to be a brainstorming conversation? And that depends on the person whose problem it is. Okay, so it's not always your choice whether it needs to be validating or brainstorming. And that is the key. If a person is upset, that's a good indication that they need a validation conversation. If the person is a little worried and just kind of confused, that's a good indicator that they're probably ready for a brainstorming conversation. So here's the thing. A big majority of the time, people just need a validating conversation. People have the solutions to their problems within themselves, and they just need to be validated and heard and understand. They need a little bit of sympathy and empathy and someone to love them through their problem. They usually can do the brainstorming on their own once they've been validated. Okay? The brainstorming conversations are super fun. I think a lot of people love to brainstorm and love to share ideas and options and explore different ways to go around a problem or to work through a problem. But that conversation can only go well if the person with the problem is ready for that type of conversation. So I have a little story to describe what I'm trying to teach here. My son was in a really bad mood. He stormed upstairs, the stomping and the loud movements, and I could tell he had a lot of emotion going on, and I was like, okay, I can do this. He comes up and he just starts expressing his feelings. Lots of emotion, lots of feelings going on, frustration, anger, irritation, annoyance. That's very typical for a teenager to feel all those emotions, and very, very largely that's part of being a teenager, I think, or growing into adulthood. He was super frustrated with some circumstances, and the interesting thing is that I had noticed, for probably a few weeks that these issues were coming, and he was starting to get a little irritated and a little annoyed, and I had lots of ideas of ways that he could solve this problem. I had a ton of good ideas. I knew how to fix this, mostly because I've lived this before, because I was a teenager once, and I knew, I had lots of good ideas. I could have done a brainstorming conversation, and I would have been blown his mind at my good ideas, because I just knew I had lots of good ideas and lots of ways to solve his problems, which it's so much easier to solve other people's problems. It just is. But he was upset, and that's an indicator that he wasn't coming to me for a brain solving conversation. He was coming to me for a validation conversation. And you know what? After validating, hearing, listening, loving, just sending good energy to him and just really sympathizing with the way he was feeling, by the end of the conversation, he felt better, he felt loved, and he knew that he could come to me. That's a validation conversation. The more we can implement validation conversations into our lives and into our parenting and into our relationships in all areas, When people know that you're willing to have a validation conversation, they're more willing to come when they're ready for a brainstorm conversation. It's about timing. It's about timing, and it's about love. Everyone is on their own timeline. They're learning at their own pace. And the reason that you have answers to other people's problems is because you had those problems before and you worked it out. They'll work it out. They'll find the solutions to their problems. When they're ready, they'll figure it out. So, validation conversation. You guys, that's what the world needs. The world needs more validation. People have a lot of problems, and they have a lot of emotions, and they have their own perspective, and they just want to be heard. They want to be heard and validated and loved. We can do that. We can do that when we know the difference between the two problem conversations, and we can watch for the indicators. When someone comes to us to talk to us, to have a conversation with us, we can watch for the signs. Are they upset? Do they have a lot of emotion? They're looking for a validation conversation. Are they pondering, puzzling, trying to think of things? Then they're ready for a brainstorm conversation. I challenge you today, try to do both conversations. Try to do a validation conversation. Try to listen to someone, ask what their problems are, and just listen, validate, sympathize, empathize. Don't give them ideas. Don't give them recommendations, because if they're upset, it's going to feel like criticism and they're going to get offended, and we don't want that. Okay? And the way you can try a brainstorming conversation is you think of a problem that you're having and ask someone for some information. People love brainstorming conversations, especially when it's not their problem, because they have lots of good ideas and they're not emotionally involved. And so you can hear a lot of good ideas and get lots of good info. But you're going to find that most conversations you have with other people, you're going to be the validator, and they're going to be the one you go to for brainstorming. And once you get really, really good at that, you can start teaching other people how to validate you. And you can start teaching other people to allow you to brainstorm with them. But the place to start is to be a validator and ask for brainstorming. I challenge you to have one validation conversation today and one brainstorming conversation. I think you're going to be such an amazing validator, and you're going to make this world a better place by using the information that you have and the sympathy and empathy that you have and the love that you have for people to make this world a better place.